welcome to the latest episode of the Moviescramble podcast. It's a beautiful sunny evening at the time of recording, which of course means that I am a sweaty mess, but my co-host here, John, looks resplendent as always. How are you, John?
I'm fine. I wouldn't like to say I'm like Prince Andrew and I never sweat. I do. That would be, and that opens up so many other connotations as well about pizza and things like that. But let's not go there. Yes, I am well. Like you say, it's a lovely sunny evening, and I haven't been out at all day. I've been sitting working away at my desk at home, looking out the window, watching people cut their grass and all sorts of stuff. And now I'm talking to you. So yes, that's going to be my day in its entirety. So the day has gone in a sort of an upward trajectory. So let's keep it going.
Okay, well, today's podcast is brought to you in a week where there was a massive supermarket fight over chocolate caterpillar cake, but we've decided to go distinctly highbrow in our chat, and we are looking at some world cinema, specifically a French film called The Translators. This is a film that has recently screened at the London French Film Festival, but I know that, John, you have seen it previously at the Glasgow Film Festival, and it's a proper big ensemble whodunit. So don't be put off by the fact that there are subtitles. It is an excellent film. For today's podcast, we are going to look at a piece of world cinema. It is a French film called The Translators, or Les Traducteurs, if you're getting fancy. This is a film that has recently screened at the London French Film Festival, and I know, John, you have seen this previously at the Glasgow Film Festival. The film centres around the Daedalus trilogy, which is a series of books written by the mysterious reclusive author Oscar Braque. The books feel like your kind of typical Scandi noir, your sort of Joan Esbo fodder that comes out fairly often, but not much is known about the author. Through a third party called Eric Angstrom, Braque decides that he is going to have his latest novel translated simultaneously by a large group of people. The idea behind this is that no version of the novel can be leaked onto the internet in any language to avoid spoilers. So Angstrom decides to coop his translators up, pretty much like battery hens, in a basement where they surrender their phones, their contact with their family, and sort of any sort of contact with the outside world at all, in order to get this book translated. Now, this is where the plot gets just a little bit twisty, because it is a very twisty plot. This is just the first in a series of twists. The book gets leaked on the internet, the first 10 pages. And of course, all of the translators turn on each other, and they decide that they have to root out whoever is the bad seed, as it were. There is a ransom to be paid in order to avoid the rest of the novel being published online. And from there, the film takes a number of twists and turns. There are so many curveballs, it's almost impossible to describe it without going into spoiler territory. But what we love about this movie is that there's a really massive international ensemble cast, with some faces that you will definitely recognise and some that you may not. John, what was your first thoughts when you watched this film?
Like you say, I saw this film at the Glasgow Film Festival, not this year, but last year, believe it or not. I think the film actually came out in 2019, or it's listed as being 2019. And it was doing the festival circuit at the start of last year, and then obviously basically everything went to shit, let's face it. So there was nothing coming out. It was supposed to return maybe June or July. I think the French Film Festival was meant to be around about then, and it didn't happen. So I did get a chance to see it. I loved the film at the time. I had it in my top 10 of the year for last year because I loved it so much. I mean, it's a very prestigious list, obviously, that, not just anything gets into it. There wasn't any Fast and Furious films last year, so that obviously meant there was a wee bit of a gap there for something. Yes, loved the film right from the very start of it. I knew that this was the kind of film that I was going to really love, because the very opening shot of it is a fire. There are books on fire, but the fire actually dies down. So it's like a kind of a reverse shot that draws you outside of a bookshop that was on fire, and now it's kind of dampened down. So it's like going from the end back to the beginning, and then it starts to tell you the story. And just that wee bit there, and you're just thinking, yeah, I'm going to love this film, because it's familiar territory in a way, because we've all been brought up with whodunits and locked door mysteries, and this is an ultimate locked door mystery because, as you say, there are 9 translators who are held within a bunker and they're locked in there without any access to the outside world, yet all these things are going on around them. I thought it was fantastic. It was really good. First time I watched it, I thought it was a great story and I really enjoyed it, and I just went along for the ride, not really knowing who was actually like the main antagonists in it and all that. And the film doesn't lend itself to that anyway. It keeps you guessing. So what I tend to do with films is I just go for the ride and I just really enjoy them, and I don't think too much about it. I don't dig too deep into it because I know if it's a decent enough film, I will watch it again and then I can take more out of it. Now, I did watch it for a second time and I got far more out of it just because I knew what the basic mechanics of it were. I'd actually forgotten some of the stuff because there was about a year in between me watching the film on 2 occasions. So it was great. Just absolutely loved it. I like mysteries anyway. I'm always intrigued by them. It's just a bit of a shame that it didn't get, or it hasn't had a full release yet, because it would have done very well on the back of something like Knives Out coming out.
Yeah, that's a very strong kind of similar vibe. There's all, that those kind of like glances across the room, and you're actually never sure. It's kind of unreliable narrator type of thing. You're not actually sure whose version of the story you're being told, and therefore who you can trust in the various scenes. You're not even really sure at times if the various scenes are people, like if the characters are acting them out, not the actors. Do you know what I mean? There's so much mistrust. But yeah, it's a real shame that it hasn't come to either a streaming platform or cinemas when they eventually reopen, because it's very much, it feels like a big Hollywood movie, but it also feels quite distinctly European as well, if that makes sense.
Yes, it's basically because the majority of the translators are European. So you've got a Spaniard, you've got Portuguese, I think you've got Danish, English, German, and Italian, and I think there's Chinese as well, and Greek. And Russian. They represent the sort of biggest markets for the book, so they're basically covered. They're covering most of the globe. Obviously not the majority of Africa and things like that, but they're covering the majority of where their bigger sales would be. So that's why they've chosen these people. The book was written in French, so therefore it's getting translated from the French into these various languages as well. So yeah, it makes it like a pan-European type of film. Now, if you think, but I don't know if you really remember this. This is obviously back in sort of like the late 60s and the 70s. You would get these sort of European co-productions where it wouldn't be Hollywood money. It would be sort of a mixture of money from various European countries, and you would get like 1 or 2 stars from each area. You'd have one English actor, like Oliver Reed or somebody like that, and they would all be speaking their own language in it, and then it would be dubbed into whatever language. So you would have like whatever your main star is. If it was a French star, when it was released in France, they would be speaking French and everybody else would be dubbed and all that. And it was kind of these sort of what they call Europud type films, because it was just like a big sort of mixture of these things, and it was very low production values and everything. So it was never a great thing. But because of the diversity that we see within cinema now, money comes from all over. So you get these kind of productions, and it works really well because the production values are so high, and especially this type of film, as you say, it looks very much like a Hollywood film. It's the kind of thing that you would expect to come out of one of the major Hollywood studios, with a whole host of stars in it. In the same way that, like, I know in the 70s they would do all these things like the Tower and Inferno, and there'd be a whole cast of characters, that kind of idea. But yes, it works very well because it is European. I don't think I'd like to see a full English remake of it, because I don't think that would work very well. Because the characters in that, for the majority of the time, they speak a mixture of either French, a wee bit of English, or their own language. And because they're all translators, they all understand enough of each other that it can actually, it doesn't feel forced that they're having a conversation in English or they're having a conversation in Spanish or whatever. And there's a scene in it as well where the without going into any details, they're trying to get information across to each other without telling the publisher. And one of them speaking Mandarin and the other one's trying to translate for other languages that he may not know and all this. So yeah, it works really, really well.
Yeah, that scene is incredibly tense. And it also just made me marvel. Like I've heard of actors sort of like learn scripts by ear. I know that's quite common, especially if there's other languages. But I've seen, it really sticks in my head. This is going to sound so stupid. In the last Mission Impossible movie, there's a scene in France, and Tom Cruise goes up to, I think it's a policeman that he shot, and he goes, "Just be désolé," in like the worst American accent ever. And it's like, did nobody work with him on this? Like, it doesn't even sound like he's trying. Whereas in this, like, the French from everyone, which is the sort of primary language, was flawless, and these actors are genuinely like Greek, Portuguese, Russian, English, whatever, Danish, the French was absolutely flawless. And that scene at the end, I'm not sure, obviously my Mandarin's not quite up to scratch, I'm not sure if it was learned by ear or if this is just something, because a lot of Europeans do obviously speak more than one language. And when those translations were sort of flying around the room, I was like, oh my, we're so lazy as English speakers, whereas there was just so much going on in that scene, and it also just made me want to whip out my Duolingo and learn some more languages. Yeah, I think what I liked about this is that despite the fact that there's quite a large cast and a lot happens, that we can't really allude to, I do feel like you still get to know enough about the cat. Like, I don't feel like their characterization is sort of skimmed over. I'm thinking obviously in particular of Helene, the character played by Sid Babette Knudsen, who I'm just a really big fan of. There's so much to her character. She is an aspiring author of her own. She's kind of bogged down by husband and kids, and this is like, she actually enjoys being in this bunker because she gets a break. She actually says, and there's a scene where they're all chatting, and she just wells up with tears because she was like, I'm mediocre. I can't do this. I can translate someone else's excellent work, but my own is just never going to be good enough. And there were so many little moments like that where you did get enough of a glimpse into the character to make you feel something for them. So it wasn't just like all these sort of 2D representations of various cultures, which, it could have gone down that road, but it did kind of stay out of very sort of stereotyping on the whole. And it did give you enough time, I thought anyway, to get to know the particular characters. Did you feel the same way?
Yeah, it kind of knocked the whole national identities on the head quite quickly, because the opening scenes where they're all kind of getting brought together, they're getting brought together like I think it's in groups of 3 that they're actually taken to this mansion. And there's the English guy, the Russian woman, and the Chinese guy. And the English guy speaks to the Chinese guy, and they're speaking in French, and he says, "Oh, have you come, directly from China?" And the Chinese guy says, "No, I've lived in Paris for 15 years. So right away, you know that it's not a typical kind of representation of a Chinese person. They do talk about censorship and things like that in the Chinese market, and how he automatically censors himself rather than it getting taken to the stage where the state actually censors what he's writing. So there was a lot of it was like just kind of nuggets of their personality, and that's all that was required. It was the strength of writing sort of pulled that through. You didn't really need to know very much about, like, especially the Danish character. The first time you see her, she's in the airport leaving to go to France, and her husband's there with the kids and screaming, and he's going, "This isn't good enough." But later you find out it was him that wanted the kids in the first place. It wasn't her idea. She wanted to do other things. So you get these sort of glimpses of what the people are like, and that's enough to inform you. Like the Italian guy, for instance, when you see him at first, he comes out of the airport and he's wearing like the tan coat and all this. So he's very sort of ballsy and very sort of in your face and all that. And he never really changes, and you don't really get to know him very well at all, but you get enough to see what type of person he is. And he is a wee bit of a caricature, that one, but there's enough there to see that he's got his own sort of personality about him. He's not just a standard character, if you like.
Yeah, I would say he was the most kind of stereotypical, because he was a bit kind of like hands and shouty. And
yes,
that was a wee kind of a slip, but on the whole, and I was sort of fascinated by I'm going to butcher her surnames, I'm sorry, Olga Kurylenko's character, Katerina, who is obsessed with this book trilogy so much so that she literally floats about in a white dress, dressed as the heroine from the novels. And even that, like, it, because you are sort of, you know, as you said, we've been brought up with these kind of whodunits and sort of big murder mysteries. Again, you're like, is that an act? Is she pretending she's crazy, but she's working through her translate? Like, it all sort of builds up to this sort of not knowing who to trust, even though you're an outsider watching this happen. And I really liked how that was done. What I also liked about this film is that it was quite, for a film that's about books, it was quite strong in its criticisms of how books are produced and sort of manufactured now, because obviously this whole thing about, you know, you have to pay a ransom to stop this novel being leaked because it's this international sensation. And it really goes to town on, you know, the translators are nothing, your name might not even get on the book, and this whole thing of, you know, art over profit or profit over art in this case. And it really goes to town on sort of, you know, this kind of idea of, you know, the character of Angstrom, sort of this kind of like grubby, greedy, you know, publisher who's just interested in money. And I thought, for everything else that's going on in this movie, it's interesting that they also chose to kind of stick in a couple of points about here's what might be wrong with the publishing industry or the literary industry, as well as you know, I thought it was just quite interesting as somebody who is like, my nose is never out a book if I'm not watching a film. So I was kind of like, oh, that was it's quite strong in its criticism, I thought.
Yeah, because the first time that you meet Angstrom, he's presenting at a book fair and you think it's just an audience to begin with, but then when he's going through the pitch, you realise that basically everybody in the room is a shareholder in Angstrom Publishing, because he says, you know, and we're all going to have a great quarter because we've got the third book of this series. And that's all he's concerned about. He's not concerned about the art involved in it. He's not concerned about literature in any way. He's concerned about the bottom line, because as it turns out, Angstrom Publishing was quite a small publishing house, and it was the success of the first book that actually projected them up, and then they get bigger, and now they're at the point where with the third book they're dependent on a certain level of sales because they have to meet shareholder projections and all this sort of stuff. It is more of a business, and he's obviously feeling bound by that as well. You get a sense that he didn't really want to be in that position, but the money's very nice and the status is very nice, you know, like being able to rent out this massive mansion and his lifestyle and everything as well, you know. Like, there was a very telling scene where it was, I think it's Christmas time, because they're down there for several months in the bunker, and they have their Christmas celebrations, and they invite Angstrom's secretary. I think she is more of a helper, more of a sort of right-hand woman, if you like. And they're all having a sort of a wee Christmas party and everything. But he's sitting upstairs on his own, and they're down there singing Burt Bacharach songs and things like that. And he's upstairs listening to classical music on his own and everything. You know, it's very away from everything. He doesn't want to be involved and all that. So, yes, it kind of showed that he's just all about the business, and he's not really interested in the art. And yes, there are points to be made. Now, the whole premise of the film is that in order to maximize profits, they were getting the book published in all the major languages at the one time, so that they don't have these rogue translations done and it goes onto the internet and all that. And obviously then that backfired on them. But yeah, it wasn't very kind, shall we say, to the book world and how they treat people. It's a commodity rather than a piece of literature.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like, you know, as I read the Joan Esco books or whatever, I like that sort of quick kind of, sort of just like a airport novel, you would call it, wouldn't you, right? But it made me think of, like, you know, like James Patterson, who, you know, is definitely not writing like 60 books a year or whatever rate of knots he's producing them at, or like your Lee Child or your Dan Browns or all those sort of ones that just seem to constantly have new books in it. And it is this sort of like churning factory. And when you saw the translators sitting downstairs in this bunker, and I think somebody remarks that you know, like battery hens get kept in better conditions, but it's this like sort of production line. And it did make me think about how some novels now, not all of them obviously, but how some novels now, it literally is a case of like, right, okay, get it on the shelves, get it in the supermarkets, get it in, you know, W.H. Smith or whatever, and it has become, as you say, it's not literature, it's not art, it's a product. And I thought that, as I say, given everything else that's going on in this film, I thought it was interesting that they managed to get that kind of critique sort of snuck in there. It doesn't go into too much detail on it, but it is definitely there. Without obviously going into too much detail about what happens, this is definitely a film that keeps you on the hook until it's the equivalent of a good page turner. It does keep you sort of interested until the very end. Without giving too much away, what was your kind of, when you first watched it, obviously not on rewatch? I mean, I didn't know where I was. I couldn't work out who to trust, what was coming next. Did you feel the same way?
Oh, exactly the same way, because, like you say, the Olga Kurylenko, I got that wrong, character was kind of all floaty and a bit vulnerable at the start, but she tended to harden up, and you would have some characters who appeared one way, they started off in one way, and then they would just completely change. Like the Danish one, when she was leaving the airport, she says, "This is going to change everything for us." And you're going, "Oh, what's that mean? Is there something, is that a clue in any way?" So it was very well done that way, because it kept you guessing. You didn't know what was going to be happening. Now, we are well versed in watching mystery films and all sorts of sort of thrillers that have sort of mystery aspects to them. And there are usually a few tells in there that you can pick up on. But in this case, they used that to their advantage. Obviously, you've mentioned the fact that the narrator or narrators in this case may have been unreliable. And you got that fairly early on, because there was stories that were told, like, for instance, with the briefcase, that was mentioned a couple of times, to do with the combination and everything, which was different in different stories. So there was little bits like that. And I noticed at the very start, where they were all brought together in the mansion, they were upstairs in the mansion, and they were in a line, and it was like a poster for the film where they were all standing there. One of the translators was standing slightly further apart from the rest of them. The rest of them were all together. And this one guy, the Greek translator, was standing slightly apart. And you're going, is that a clue? Does that mean something?
You see everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You start to second guess everything because of that. And of course, the film works in a way that it's not really telling you very much at all. So when it does turn round about the halfway mark, I think it's about 55 minutes in, there's a scene that just kind of changes everything. Now, that's not giving anything away, saying that there is a scene like that, because the film is full of them. There are bits that happen all the way through the film, but this is a sort of a major one, and you're going, oh, all right, oh, where are we going from here? What does this actually mean now? Because up until that point, you're building up a certain narrative in your own head about what is actually happening and who may be involved and who's not involved. And then that just completely blows it away, and you're just going, oh, right, okay. And that scene itself is beautifully done because of the way that it's staged and the way that it is shot, because it's maybe a second or third scene, which is very similar. These scenes up to that point are almost chapter the story.
Yeah.
And they, up until that point, they're shot in a certain way. The characters look a certain way in them, and then it just gets literally gets turned around. The camera actually turns around, and then things totally change, and you're going, right, don't know where I am now, but I'm enjoying myself so much that I'm going with it. Sometimes you get these twists and you just go, oh, come on, no. But no, this one worked really well. It was very, very well done. I thought, yes. And I did notice as well that for a film that was a sort of locked door mystery, there was a car chase in it, which was completely unexpected and worked really, really well. It was amazing. Hopefully what we've done here in talking about the film is entice people to go, what are they talking about? What are they actually meaning? So yeah, I would encourage people to actually seek it out rather than just listening to us whittering on, but obviously not before you stop the podcast at the end, rather than just now. Thanks very much.
Obviously, in a way, this going to sound silly, I was glad I hadn't watched it in a cinema, because there was one particular point where I gasped so loudly. I was like, I'm actually really glad there's no one else here to see this, because I just felt like a bit of a muppet. But there's so much of it. I think in a way, like, it sets up these characters, and you're like, okay, there's the Brit, he's the kind of geeky one on the skateboard, and that, you know, the Russian woman, she's a drip, she's floating about in that wedding dress, and, you know, the Greek guy is spouting all this Marxist theory, and the Italian guy seems to be angry all the time. And I feel like it does kind of sort of challenge you to sort of like overcome your own initial prejudices of getting to know these characters, and then it just rips the rug from right under your feet and just goes, surprise, it's going into like whatever you thought was going to happen is not happening. But yeah, I really, really would encourage people to seek it out. It's fantastic, and it's one of these films that, like, it's so well executed in the way it is, as you kind of hinted to at the beginning. I hope there isn't any sort of plans for a remake, or a sort of glossier remake, or an English language remake, because this just works as it is. It's all like it's an almost perfect film, I think.
I was thinking that when I was watching it the second time, because, like I say, when you watch something the second time, well, when I watch something for the second time, watch it with a more slightly critical eye, so therefore you're not taking the story in so much, but you're taking in all the various elements. And the film probably worked better for me the second time than it did the first time, because there was so much to it. It was just so enjoyable. Yeah, that's the sign of a good film, and that's the sign of a film that is pretty close to being perfect.
Yeah, and it definitely does merit repeat viewing, not because it's, right, there is a lot going on, but it's not so complicated that you're going to come away from it going, I didn't understand that. But it's very rich in content. So when you watch it a second time, yeah, you're looking for these like little like red herrings or clues. You see somebody standing further apart or what, and you're trying to get what you missed the first time around, because it's one of these things. Everyone wants to think that they're the smart guy and they've worked it out, right? So when you go back, you want to see what you've missed the first time around. It's definitely a recommend from me. I would really strongly encourage people to seek it out and to watch it. It's a really cracking cast, and just so clever and so well done. And actually, if you enjoy reading and you enjoy cinema, this is like the perfect combination, isn't it? It's books and movies all in one.
Yeah, there was a really nice use of music in the film as well. To begin with, there was a sort of a light jazzy score that when you get introduced to the various characters, and I thought, okay, right, so this is where we're going to be going. And then it changed to something more somber. There's some introduction of some classical elements, and then the last half of it was pretty much a Bernard Herrmann type Hitchcock score.
It was like ticking almost, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it got intense.
It worked really well, especially during certain elements of the film. Like I said, there was a bit involving a car chase and all that. So yeah, the music was very subtly done. It wasn't like totally in your face, but it really complemented what you were actually seeing on screen, and it made it so much better in terms of a spectacle. It's the kind of thing that you want from a score, that it's there, but it's not totally overpowering, or it's not something that you totally notice. But I would be quite happy listening to that on its own. I don't think it's commercially available. Obviously, the film's hardly commercially available, so I very much doubt the soundtrack will be. But yeah, it's something I'd probably want to try and get a hold of at some point.
Definitely. It was, as you say, towards the end, I was conscious of a sort of ticking sound towards the end as well, which automatically makes your heart kind of start to flutter, doesn't it? Because you're like ticking, because it just leads you down that road. But no, it was really well done. As I said, it's definitely a recommend from me whenever this becomes available on, as I say, streaming services or cinema. Is it a recommend from you as well? Do you want to take it?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. As I said, it was one of my favourite films from last year, and I haven't changed my opinion on that at all since then. It was absolutely cracking. Yeah. Seek it out when it comes out. Yeah.
I can totally understand why that made the prestigious John MacArthur top 10. I get that.
Yeah. I'll need to come up with a catchy title for my top 10, you know. The Johns doesn't sound quite right.
It really doesn't. That sounds like it might be the equivalent of the Razzies or something. It sounds like an insult, not an award. Yeah, so I mean, as we mentioned earlier, this is a massive ensemble cast, and each character brings their own sort of background story and menacing looks to this particular film. So what we thought we would do is look at other movies that have really big ensemble cast. And it was actually quite hard, I thought anyway, to narrow it down to a top three. And I'm going to quickly honourably mention The Death of Stalin, and I'm kind of kicking myself I didn't think of this sooner, because that was just phenomenally done as well. Just a really, really clever sort of comedy of horrors, I think I described it in my Moviescramble review. So, John, I will kick off with you. What is your first pick for a movie with a big ensemble cast?
Well, you can't get much bigger than Ocean's 11, the remake, not the 1960s original.
I was wondering which one you meant, actually, because you didn't give a date, and I thought, well, I wonder if we'll go for the Dean Martin one. So
no, that's an okay film. It's not a great film. The remake was so much better than it. It's a film directed by Steven Soderbergh. It stars George Clooney, Elliot Gould, Casey Affleck, Scott Caan, Don Cheadle, Carl Reiner, Matt Damon, Andy Garcia, Julia Roberts, and various other people as well, which is just absolutely amazing. And it's basically your ultimate heist movie. Danny Ocean, played by George Clooney, gets together a group of con artists and burglars, and they are trying to steal from the three casinos which sit below the vault of the three casinos which sit below Terry Benedict's various establishments in Las Vegas. It's a fantastic film. I can even forgive Don Cheadle doing an English accent in it, which is not,
I forgot
not a thing
that.
to behold.
Terrible.
It is pretty bad. Very much like the Translators, it's a film that just rolls along very, very nicely. You're never bored at any moment. There's a fantastic soundtrack. I think it was David Holmes that did the soundtrack for it. It reintroduced Elvis Presley into a new generation with A Little Less Conversation, which was included in it. And it was taken on from there and obviously became a big hit. It's ultimate heist movie. It's fun. It's very clever. And you've got a whole host of stars in it who you never really get very much background about any of them. And it's all really about the heist. Probably the Brad Pitt character and the George Clooney character are the main ones, but this is a real sort of ensemble job because it takes so many people to do a job like this. And with the best of these films, there are twists and turns all the way through it. I love this movie. I just think it's fantastic. I've watched it so many times over the years, and it's one of these ones when it comes on the television, it's just like, right, not doing anything else for the next hour and a half. I'm just going to watch George Clooney with some really, really nice suits on and, and just swanning about and getting things organised for the big heist. And it's obviously no real surprise that they kind of get away with it in the end, but it's all about the journey rather than the actual outcome. And there's a beautiful scene towards the end of it with I think it's the fountains, might be outside Caesar's Palace, and there's a version of Claire de Lune that's played as well, and that's just absolutely lovely. It's an orchestral version of it, which is sort of my preferred version. I don't really like the sort of cut down proper classical version. I prefer the sort of the pops orchestra version of it, if you like, the stuff you get in the cheap, or you used to get in the sort of cheap compilation, classics now kind of ideas. It's got that kind of idea, but it's just brilliant. Really, really good film.
Yeah, from what I remember in it, because it's been a while since I've seen it, actually, Brad Pitt is always eating. Like, they're trying to come up with these really serious plans, and he's always got like a big meatball sub hanging out his mouth. I forgot that Don Cheadle did an accent that would honestly make Dick Van Dyke look like a proper Cockney. I kind of forgot about that, actually, now that you've brought it back. But no, I just remember my dad, obviously a massive Rat Pack fan. As soon as this was sort of announced, he was like, we're all going family trip to the cinema. This is going to be such a good movie. And just sort of, it just all looked very swish and very glamorous. And obviously you've got like two of, Hollywood sort of, men who are considered the most attractive men in Hollywood, swanning around in sort of really well-cut suits and stuff like that. So it's very, very glamorous. I don't particularly remember being a fan of the sequels, but I remember this really nailing the sort of, that kind of almost sort of jokey, sort of whiskey in hand, sort of easy-ozy kind of tone of the Rat Pack, but still delivering a really good, as you say, heist thriller as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 12 was pretty bad. It was more of a Ocean's European vacation style thing, and there's part of that where the Julia Roberts character is pretending to be Julia Roberts. But Ocean's 13 is so much better because they're back in Vegas, and I think it's Al Pacino is the antagonist in it. They actually team up with people who, like Terry Benedict, for instance, he's involved with them this time and all that. So, and obviously we shout out for Ocean's 8, the female remake as well. That's a particularly good film. That was about 2 years ago, I think that was out. One of the characters in that is always eating. It's a sort of a nice wee touch as well. Yeah, aye. Yes, so yep, that was my first choice. What was yours?
I feel like you've gone for something really cool, and I'm going to bring the mood right down with Tom McCarthy's 2015 movie Spotlight. Just listen to this cast list, it's crazy. Mark Ruffalo, Liev Schreiber, Michael Keaton, Rachel McAdam, John Slattery, Stanley Tucci, Billy Crudup, and Paul Guilfoyle, to name a few. Do you know, when I was looking at movies with big casts, I always just think of the main four journalists in this, and it never really occurred to me. And I was looking, obviously doing my research on IMDb, and I was like, everyone's in this. And this is obviously the true story of, you know, how the Boston Globe broke the news of the child molestation scandal within the Catholic Church. So super cheery viewing. But the execution is incredible. I am a really big fan of films about investigative journalism ever since I watched All the President's Men many, many years ago. I just love this whole idea of, you know, people really getting to the truth of things, and, you know, journalism that isn't just clickbait. There's so many good performances in this. This was kind of the first time I noticed Mark Ruffalo as, inverted commas, a serious actor, but he's obviously since gone on to do things like Dark Waters. I know this much is true, and he's really, he carries this film with such emotion, and it's one of these films where it's sensational because of the subject matter, but it doesn't sensationalize its subject matter, if that makes sense. It's very, very dignified in its approach to how these journalists really were totally up against it, in terms of they were going to be sued by this massive organization, which was the Catholic Church, that had all the lawyers wrapped up and all the, you know, the families, you know, in their pockets and stuff like that. And there was a scene, and I was kind of watching clips of it the other day. There's a scene where it's one of the guys, he's a victim of abuse, and he's like, you know, see, when you're poor and your dad's an alcoholic or whatever, and your mum doesn't know what day it is, or whatever, and a priest pays attention to you, how do you say no to God? And actually, I've actually just got shivers in myself right there just now. Watching that again, I was like, this film was absolutely incredible. And, you know, the real journalists behind it as well, just so brave, in the sense that they were taking on a sort of massive worldwide institution, and they just went for it. There's a cracking scene as well where Mark Ruffalo's got like these diocesan like calendars as well, and he stacks them all up and he's looking through them, and he's like, that priest said they were on sick leave, and there they appear in this calendar on this date at this parish, and he sort of realises a pattern of them all being moved around. Michael Keaton is excellent in it as well. Liev Schreiber is the sort of new editor, and he's wanting to ditch the spotlight section, but obviously they've got this story and they've got the bit between their teeth, and they have to really prove to him that it's worth pursuing as well. Rachel McAdam is excellent as well. She's just excellent in everything. And so Stanley Tucci, how can you not like Stanley Tucci? But he plays the lawyer that's sort of representing the families as well. And there's not a wasted performance, not a wasted word. And it's one of those ones when you see all the names go up in the trailer, it's like, you know, Academy Award nominee or Golden Globe nominee or whatever, and it's a really, really cracking piece of cinema. I take it you've seen it. It's been out for a while.
Yeah, I have seen it. It's a great movie. Always the problem with these type of films is it's just people sitting in rooms talking to each other, but the way that they do it, the tension that they carry forward, the fact that it's involving the likes of priests and everything as well, and I didn't really know very much about the story before I'd watched the film. I knew bits and pieces about it, and obviously there was a scandal, but the depth of it, and the fact that when they started to uncover things, and then, like you say, there's that scene, the Mark Ruffalo scene, where he's doing the cross-checking about things, and there's certain phrasing of their assignments and all that, and then they says, you know, well, how many is there, you know, and there's like 90, and they're like, what? And they were thinking it was maybe going to be like 4 or something like that. I said, oh, yeah, it's an absolutely brilliant movie. Really, really well done. It was, I think it got a few sort of Oscar nominations and things like that as well, didn't it? I don't know if it actually won anything, but it was definitely up there.
Yeah, I don't think it did, but I do think it was nominated. As I say, it was definitely the first time where I sat up and paid attention to Mark Ruffalo. Like, he does vulnerability so beautifully. It's actually, like, I feel like there's so many things that I've watched him in where I'm just like, you look like a haunted soul. And yet in real life, he's just a super chilled out, like, stoner, basically. And yet the stuff that he brings to these roles is incredible. I think it's on Netflix, so if anyone hasn't seen it, I would recommend that you do.
I think it is, yeah. I think you're right.
Your next pick?
My next pick is the 2009 reboot of Star Trek. This was a film that took an absolute age to get made. Obviously, the Star Trek movie franchise had been going on for a number of decades. It amassed 10 films and kind of ran out of steam a wee bit. So rather than continuing with the way they were going to do it, they decided to completely reboot it. J.J. Abrams directed it, and obviously it was based on the original Star Trek series, Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and all that. So it's a natural ensemble, if you like. In this film, likes of John Cho, Ben Cross, Bruce Greenwood, Simon Pegg, Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Winona Ryder, Zoe Saldana, Carl Urban, Anton Yelchin, Eric Bana, and Leonard Nimoy. So quite the cast there. Yeah. The film very neatly addressed the whole sort of history of Star Trek and its canon, if you like, by doing something completely different and basically basing it in what you would regard as an alternate timeline, an alternate universe, if you like. It works really, really well. It's a cracking film. I know it's not one, well, all three films, the last three films, haven't been totally well received by sort of diehard Star Trek fans, but these films have been massively successful because they bring a spectacle to screen, and it's characters that pretty much everybody knows in one way or another. You may not be a great Star Trek fan, but you can understand what's going on. And quite helpful in this film as well, it's a bit of an origin story for Kirk and Spock and how they all come together. Carl Urban is just, it's almost as if he was born to play the role of Bones McCoy. It's absolutely amazing. He just does such a good job. It's completely different to the original version of it, but it catches the essence of it, and that's kind of the way that all of the actors have taken it this time. They've kind of captured something about the character that they're playing without just pastiching them or totally just trying to be like them. And it's a thoroughly enjoyable 2-hour sci-fi romp where, as I say, you get new elements and you get the old elements as well, the likes of Leonard Nimoy playing sort of a cameo role in it as well. I just loved it. I thought it was a fantastic movie.
I've never been a Trekkie, but I can do it on both hands. I do want to see this though, because I've heard really good things about it, and I know that there has been a lot of fuss and it didn't really perform well at the box office, but I kind of feel like with this type of film, a film of this scale and a sort of something that's been so ingrained in culture for so long, they had to do something different. Like, they couldn't have just, ripped off the TV show or previous movies or whatever. I have also heard that Simon Pegg's accent is good in this.
It's all right. He's in the vicinity of Scotland when when he's saying it. He's not too bad in it. I think because we know Simon Pegg and what he actually sounds like, it is a bit of a departure. But if you don't, then it's not too bad. Yeah, he can kind of get away with it. I think there is a wee bit of Mickey taking in that performance, I think, with him doing... I'm not sure if it's supposed to be an Aberdeen accent or what, but I'm not quite sure. It's not quite as bad as... Did you ever see that Jude Law film where he was a submarine commander in it, and he did an Aberdeen accent, and it was just full on, and it was really... It was actually...
Like a thick Doric accent. Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, he really went for it, and it actually comes across really well, but it just seems really strange because it's Jude Law, and you don't think of him... Well, I know he does accents and everything, but it doesn't, it's not quite... something doesn't quite sound right about it, but it works. Yeah, but again, in this case, yes, it's the same sort of thing. It works well here. The thing about these films is they don't need to be true to the whole Star Trek lore to be enjoyable. Nah. They're trying to get as many people watching these things as possible. I was going to say,
they want someone like me who's never seen any Star Trek at all to go and watch that movie, right? So the whole so you can't, and I assume, obviously, you have Star Trek knowledge. I assume there is like in jokes and sort of references that if you watch the TV show and the previous movies, you will understand. They would probably fly right over my head, but I'm just looking for sort of entertaining blockbuster with this type of thing. Yeah. I do want to watch it. It does look good.
Yeah, no, it works on both levels. There are a lot of sort of wee in jokes and wee mentions and things of certain things that you go, oh yeah, well that's very clever, the way they've done that. But it doesn't detract from it if you don't realise it, because a lot of it is just kind of throwaway remarks. Like, for instance, Anton Yelchin has a very sort of thick Russian accent in it, because the original crew were sort of multinational. It was obviously this like peace and harmony, boldly going to an adventure. So he, in this film, has to do a sort of ship-wide broadcast, and people can't understand him because of his Russian accent. He's having to do a code in order to get it to be able to start the broadcast, and the system doesn't recognise his accent and things like that. So there's wee bits about that, and there's all sorts of wee bits, and it's quite nice. But yeah, you don't need it in order to enjoy it. This was the most successful of the sort of the latter three films. The second film, Into Darkness, really split fans because it kind of mirrored this. Yes, yeah. Aye, that really kind of split fans, and I think there was a Star Trek convention that rated this as being the worst of the Star Trek films to date, which clearly isn't. They're kind of forgetting some of the really dodgy ones. With William Shatner in a corset, it's not a good look for a 70-year-old man.
No. Oh, we were definitely a Star Wars house, not a Star Trek house. I've never seen any of it at all, but I would watch it just because it just seems like a sort of enjoyable kind of switch your mind off blockbuster and just enjoy it at face value sort of thing. Yeah, my next pick, I'm really trying not to. I've said this film title 4 times today, and every time I've said a really bad word because I can't say it without thinking of Malcolm Tucker. So my next pick is Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which is the 2011 Thomas Alfredson movie. This is like, they picked up a directory of British acting nobility and just dumped them all in one movie, right? It's like a proper British, sort of classic spy thriller, obviously based on the John le Carré novel, and I would say a remake, of the 70s TV series. It's still very text, etc. So ensemble cast including Gary Oldman, John Hurt, Tom Hardy, Colin Firth, Mark Strong, Toby Jones, Kathy Burke, Kieran Hines, Stephen Graham, and Benedict Cumberbatch. So it literally is like a who's who of everyone who's ever been in a British movie. It's obviously set in the Cold War era. It's sort of centres around the story of this kind of veteran spy, George Smiley, who is forced out of retirement because Control, played by John Hurt, thinks that there's a mole in British intelligence and he has to work out who this is. I must admit, it's a film that on first viewing, I really struggled to keep up because it's incredibly dense and wordy and there's a lot going on. But I did really enjoy it. I like films that really make you have to sit up and pay attention and focus. It all feels really grim. It's very muted. Everything's kind of like blues and greys, and there's that horrible 70s orange tile everywhere that seemed to be in office blocks sort of everywhere. And there is some kind of good action sequences as well. And similar to the Translators, you're actually not sure who you can trust because everyone is, covering their own back and telling their own story. And even, George Smiley at the centre of this, you're like, well, do I trust you as well? And whose agenda are you working to? So there's a lot that sort of keeps you guessing. It definitely is one that kind of benefits from repeat viewing. But it's proper, like, old-fashioned spy thriller. It's like, phone tapping, paranoia, getting followed down an alleyway and you can hear steps behind you, that sort of thing. It definitely is a kind of masterclass in, what it is to produce a sort of good British spy thriller. And again, despite the cast being so huge, because I was practically breathless reading that list out, I feel like you do get to know enough of the characters. They're not reliable and you're not sure if what you're being told is the truth, but you do get to know enough about their backgrounds to sort of try and make a decision as to whether or not you hedge your bets with them. I really like this movie. It is a film that I have watched several times purely because, as I say, the first time I was just like, wow, this is a lot. But I know you've watched it and I know you really enjoyed it as well. It feels like it was made in the 70s as well. It really gets the mood and the colouring and everything. I can't remember who did the soundtrack as well, but it obviously finishes with Beyond the Sea as well, which is a kind of bizarre sort of choice at the end of this, but it's just a really cracking bit. It's one of those films that you're just like, yeah, that's British cinema. Fuck yeah, it's one of those ones that makes you feel really proud that it's been made. I mean, like, we always lose out to these big glossy American things, and this is something that I think makes you proud of, like, sort of British cinema and British acting talent. I mean, you've obviously seen it, yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. I remember seeing the TV series when it came out as well, back in it must have been the late 70s, I think it was, with Alec Guinness in the main role. Yeah, but Gary Oldman is fantastic as George Smiley in this. Apparently, he was concerned that his performance was too low key in the film. He kept asking, like, am I doing enough here for this performance? You know, or is it just because he felt he was just kind of sitting and barely reacting to people when they were actually talking to him, or where he was involved in certain situations, and he thought it was a bit too low key, but he kept getting told, no, it's fine, just stay with it. It works really well. It fits in with the tone and all that. And you've got to feel for his character as well because of the way that his domestic situation is with his wife playing away. I think it's with the Kieran Hines character.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There's a bit of the Christmas party where she's away talking to him while everybody else is singing the Internationale for a good laugh, you know, British intelligence. And was it called the Circus? That's what it was called, wasn't it? The British intelligence. Yes. Yeah. And then there's another one where he comes back home unexpectedly and he finds this guy sitting at his dining room table and he's putting his shoes on underneath the table as if George Smiley's not going to notice him doing that. But, oh man, that's brutal. But yes, it felt really, really authentic in terms of the muted colours and the fact that there was dodgy haircuts left, right, and centre.
Dodgy haircuts galore. Like, I didn't think it was possible to make Tom Hardy look ugly, and there he is nipping about in a sort of beige polo neck for the majority of this with just the worst fringe I've ever seen. Like, they just destroyed that man's beauty. But yeah, it's definitely it's funny that you said that, actually, because it's a film where I think that's why I struggled to get a read as well, because there wasn't those sort of knowing glances across the room. Everyone is very, like, you know, everyone has a poker face, and that is maintained throughout. So they don't give you those sort of visual clues or even sort of like weak sort of winks or, you know, nudges that you would usually get in a kind of spy thriller. It's serious, if that makes sense. But yeah, no, I love this film. It's funny because Chris absolutely hates this, and every time I suggest watching it, he's like, "Nah, you're on your own. That's 2 hours I'm not getting back." But I love this. I think it's so good. I actually think, if I remember rightly, the original TV series, a wee part of it was filmed in What Brothers, where of course I took my first foray into public service.
Wow.
I'm sure it was there. I'm sure it was in there because the building's so old and obviously hasn't changed since it was built inside or outside. I'm sure it was filmed in there.
Yeah, it's a bit of a labyrinth in that shop as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Such fond memories. Moving swiftly on, your last pick.
My last pick is another J.J. Abrams joint. It is Mission Impossible 3. Now, the very fact that I haven't chosen any of the later films is an indication as to this being my favourite Mission Impossible film. It's just got a really, really fantastic cast in Tom Cruise, Philip Seymour Hoffman, who is the best baddie in the whole Mission Impossible franchise. You got Ving Rhames, Billy Crudup, Michelle Monaghan, Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, Kerry Russell, Maggie Q, and Lawrence Fishburne, as if you needed somebody like Lawrence Fishburne just in a supporting role. And obviously the whole point behind Mission Impossible is it's a team effort, and this plays very well because it's a lot of characters in there who are they work really nicely together. It was a kind of a turning point for the franchise in that The previous film was a John Woo film, which was just didn't really do it for me. No, I try not to, because I don't really think dueling motorcycles really works very well for me. It's and a roundhouse kick instead of just punching a guy in the face, all this sort of stuff. There's a bit too much of that sort of stuff. But this is just a cracking spy thriller. It has a really good opening sort of rescue scene, and that kind of informs how the rest of the film goes. You get to see what Philip Seymour Hoffman's like. He's absolutely horrible in it, but he's not horrible in a real sort of moustache twirling baddie. He's just a horrible guy, and he just gets on with it. And it's one of these things that it's a wee bit like the Translators, in that you don't know who you're supposed to trust, because the Impossible Missions Force is made up of various people. Again, sort of a secret service, again, like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, that you don't know who you can trust. The only people you can really trust in here are obviously Tom Cruise character, Ethan Hunt, and the Ving Rhames character, because they've been about for so long that they're okay, but everybody else is kind of open to debate what's going on. Film just trucks along very, very nicely. There's a few wee gags in it as well. You see Ethan Hunt, actually, he's retired at the beginning of it as well, and he's pulled back in for one more mission, And of course, you see Tom running as well at one point.
I mean, it wouldn't be a Mission Impossible film without it.
With his fairly unique all-out sprint for 1.5 miles, which I don't think anybody can actually do in real life. I don't think Olympic athletes could do the sort of speeds that he does. So he's obviously doing something right. It's just a brilliant, brilliant movie, and I think I might have talked about it before, because I'm kind of getting flashbacks about some of the stuff that I've been saying here. I think I may have mentioned it at one point, but back in the distant past. Probably have. And we'll probably mention it again when we do a Mission Impossible catch-up podcast at some point as well, no doubt. Since there's going to be a film out this year, we might as well. But yes, great movie.
Yeah, no, it is. I think what I like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I really love Sean Harris. I think he is a phenomenal actor. And again, I kind of feel like in a similar way, they are both actors who I don't think they belong in big franchise movies. Do you know what I mean? But the sort of gravitas that they bring to these villains, they're just, as you say, it's not it's not tying lassies to the railroad line. They're just not good people and not nice people, and have no interest in sort of reflecting on their behaviour or whatever. They're just there to be bad. And Philip Seymour Hoffman is, I mean, it's such a loss that he's no longer here, but he is so good in this movie. And I think, as much as I love Sean Harris, I feel like Philip Seymour Hoffman sort of pips into the post slightly in the Mission Impossible ranking of villains. But I mean, I didn't see the films when they came out of the cinema, so we sort of watched the box set a while ago. And I think you're right. This is where the first film was it could have almost been a one-off, and they could have just left it, but they obviously pursued this. But I think this is the film where you start to notice sort of better stunts, bigger casts, better actors, obviously attracting the likes of Philip Seymour Hoffman, and just sort of kind of, to quote Simi, sort of kind of balls to the wall approach of just really going for it and creating this big blockbuster franchise. Nice pick. That is really...
there's a really nice scene in the film where he has to get into a building in order to get the rabbit's foot, and you're never really told what the rabbit's foot is to begin with. And it's basically swinging from one building to another. And this was when the sort of the big stunts actually started happening. But they show that, but then there's a whole other sequence after that where he's escaping, and you just don't see that at all. You just see him crashing out a window about 120 feet up. And you think any other film would have had him running through, shooting bad guys, all this sort of stuff. But no, it's just you hear him saying, I'm coming out, and you see the window smashing and I'm jumping out. It's just very well done. It's sort of economical, and that's what you kind of want, because you can have too much of a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I really wonder how much it costs to insure Tom Cruise, because that guy does not seem to have that sort of normal built-in fear that most humans would have. He just, I mean, whatever you think of him as in his personal life or whatever, he delivers what an audience wants, and he goes for it with the stunts, and there's no question of it being anyone but him that carries them out as well. He's obviously an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah, definitely. So, your last choice?
So from multi-million pound, blockbuster franchise to a little bit of Shakespeare, I am going for the 1995 version of Richard III. I am actually a really big Shakespeare fan. I have been since I started reading Macbeth in high school, and Richard III is one of my favourites. I have watched many incarnations on stage and on screen. If you're really looking for a laugh, let's watch the Larry Olivier version where you can see the grease paint on his face, and it's very, very camp and over the top. But this is the Sir Ian McKellen version, so it's a kind of mixed cast. There's you get Ian McKellen, Annette Bening, Bill Patterson, Maggie Smith, Robert Downey Jr. pops up as well, Jim Broadbent, Donald Sumter, Kristen Scott Thomas, and for those of you who watched Line of Duty, Adrian Dunbar. So obviously he's the kind of quintessential scheming Shakespearean villain, and this version translates the action from 15th century to the 1930s in England, and it sort of uses Richard III as a kind of allegory for the rise of fascism ahead of World War II. So it's really well updated. I think sometimes when they try to update these plays, there can feel like a really big conflict between the language and what's actually visually happening, but this really, really works. McKellen is obviously having the time of his life. He's got the pencil-thin moustache, he's got the jackboots, the hat at the jaunty angle, and when he's given the famous sort of "Now's the winter of our discontent" speech, he's doing it into sort of old radio mic, and all of a sudden the red, black and white banners roll down and you see the crowds of people shouting it. It is camp, and there is a couple of points where you're just like, oh, right, okay, you've taken the analogy too far. But it's so well executed, and the cast are like, there's not one person who you think you are struggling to read these lines, which is what happens a lot in these sort of big budget adaptations. You only have to look at the two Hamlets that came out with Kenneth Branagh and Mel Gibson to know that not everyone can do Shakespeare, as it were. But obviously, McKellen's a Stratford regular, a Globe regular, and he is just so compelling, so enjoying the sort of luxury of being just a total shit, because that's what this character is. It's just a total shit. And even if you don't like Shakespeare, I think this is quite accessible because it's visually it's something you're quite familiar with. Obviously, the advent of World War II, it sort of uses the battle between the houses of Lancaster and York to sort of represent the battle between sort of liberalism and fascism, and it's just really well done. I think that the whole cast, you've obviously got like some of the Grand Dame Maggie Smith making an appearance as well, and it's everyone is excellent, and I think that's really hard to find in a Shakespeare adaptation, because I feel like there's always somebody who feels like they're tripping over their lines, but everyone here is really, really good, and as I say, it's just visually quite good fun. I should say it's directed by Richard Longcrane as well. I don't know if you've seen it. I feel like this is one of my niche. Oh, you have?
No, I've seen it, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't seen an awful lot of Shakespeare, but I saw this when it came out. And what I found with Shakespeare is I find it really difficult to begin with until I can get into the way of the words and actually figuring out what they mean. So it usually takes me a wee while, but I was familiar with Richard III, so I knew about it. And obviously there's a very flash opening, Now's the winter of our discontent, and the way that they do that, like you say, with the big microphone, and he taps it to begin with as well, just to make sure that it's on and on. No, I thought that was fantastic. And there's a lot of fourth wall breaking in it. There's a lot of speaking directly to camera. Yeah, it was really good. And like I say, I mean, Robert Downey Jr. was really good in that film as well.
It actually was, yeah.
Yes, I as I say, I haven't seen an awful lot of Shakespeare productions. I've actually been to the Globe. I saw A Winter's Tale at the Globe.
Oh, lovely.
Which was really good. And obviously, when you were talking about updates, there was an update of Coriolanus, which was a film Gerard Butler was in it, wasn't he?
Oh my God, I totally forgot that existed. You're right.
And he was really good in that. And that was updated, so it was like it was like the Balkans War. And there was BBC News reports to sort of split it up. I think it was John Humphreys or something. No, it wasn't John Humphreys. I can't remember, but it was somebody. It was like a BBC News reporter doing the various bits.
I totally forgot about that, because the most recent version I watched, it was like National Theatre Live, and it was the Ray Fiennes Coriolanus. I really wish I like Titus Andronicus, right? Because it's just mental violence. But I never feel like that's going to translate to the screen, as it were. I feel like these sort of bigger ones, I also feel like there's a kind of safety in the bigger ones as well. So like your Romeo and Juliet, your Hamlet, which obviously been done to death, and obviously Richard III, I think because they are quite accessible and the stories are quite well known, that they somehow sort of make better cinema, as it were. But no, I totally forgot about the Gerard Butler Coriolanus. I'm going to seek that out, actually, because I forgot that existed.
Yeah, it's a good one. But yeah, Richard III is a particularly good choice. I think there's always a problem with Shakespeare because you either have a really short version of a play or you have like a really long version. Doesn't seem to be that sort of middle ground. And I think Richard III's quite short, isn't it?
It is one of the
film
shorter
version.
ones.
Yeah.
This one, yeah, it is one of the shorter plays as well. It's obviously not as long as.
Obviously, not being familiar, I wasn't saying, oh, they've cut out that whole.
John's like,
the whole bit, you know.
Act 2, verse 3. That whole speech is missing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can take it for what it is. I just took it for being a film rather than being a Shakespeare play, you know. So if I can enjoy it that way, then that's how I'm going to enjoy it. And
I think that's the thing. If you even if you don't like Shakespeare, it's a good enough story, and visually it's interesting because there are like battle scenes as well. There's like they have tanks and they have like shootouts and stuff like that as well. So there is enough in it that even if you know the idea of like a 2.5 hour Shakespeare play doesn't do anything for you, I think this is just entertaining as a movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So that is our picks for ensemble cast movies. We did have one whole reply, who may or may not be my fiance, to our call for what your sort of favourites. The list here is Sin City, a cracking film, Ocean's 11, Crash. I'm sure he means Trial of the Chicago 7, which again I really liked. It got a lot of hate, but I really enjoyed it. And obviously Knives Out, which I am surprised that neither of us mentioned, but I think we were making a sort of conscious effort not to, because it's probably one of the more obvious recent choices. If you have any favourites that you'd like to let us know about, you can reach us on all the usual social channels at Moviescramble, or you can email us, podcasts@moviescramble.co.uk, where you can either suggest your favourite ensemble movies, or if you have an idea for a podcast that you'd like us to cover, you can let us know. Soon we will resume our regular content schedule, but for now it's goodbye from me and from my lovely co-host, John.
Bye.